Okay, one of the things that you need to be able to do with the heart is not just know the parts, but know the pathway the blood is going to take as it goes through the heart. There's lots of ways that you can study that. One of the things that I tend to recommend that students do is get some sidewalk chalk and go draw a heart on their driveway or sidewalk or whatever, and then walk the pathway of blood. That can help you study things as you go. Get a picture and label it multiple times, but you'll see questions like, a red blood cell just passed through the tricuspid valve. Which chamber did it just come from, or which chamber is it going to next, or things like that. And so you need to make sure you know the pathway of blood. So I'm going to walk you through that on this picture that is unlabeled just to get you there. I'm going to start with the superior and the inferior vena cava. Blood returns to the heart from the systemic circuit through those two vessels plus the coronary sinus into the right atrium. The right atrium pumps the blood through the tricuspid valve, and then that takes us into the right ventricle. Right ventricle pumps the blood through the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk, which splits into two pulmonary arteries that you can't see in this picture. And then that takes us off to the lungs. Notice the color changes in the lungs. That's because that's where we pick up oxygen, drop off carbon dioxide. Then we come back to the heart via the pulmonary veins. Remember, there's usually about 4 of those. This picture is not showing you 4. When we come back to the heart from the lungs, we enter from the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. The left atrium pumps the blood through the bicuspid or mitral valve into the left ventricle. The left ventricle pumps the blood through the aortic valve, and then we'll enter the aorta and then go wherever we need to go in the body. We'll drop off oxygen, pick up carbon dioxide, and then we'll return back to where we started. Practice that multiple times. Make some flashcards if you need to, however it'll help you study it, but make sure you know that pathway backwards and forwards, essentially. Okay, from there, let's talk about the heart is really 2 side-by-side pumps. You've got the right side and the left side. The right side of the heart is called the pulmonary circuit, and it's called that because it pumps blood to the lungs and back. So the right side, notice that's the blue side on this picture. That's because it's deoxygenated blood on that side. Its job is to pump the blood out to the lungs so that we can pick up the oxygen and then return us in back to the left side of the heart. The left side of the heart is the systemic circuit. It's called systemic because it's supplying blood to all the body systems. That would be, digestive, reproductive, all those nice little body systems. The workload of the left side of the heart is much higher than the right side. So if you remember in the last video, one of the things that I told you was you can always tell the difference between the left side and the right side because the left wall is thicker than the right. That's because its workload is so much higher than the right side. The right side only has to pump the blood to the lungs and back, and those are literally right beside the heart. That's not all that hard to do. The left side, on the other hand, has to pump the blood up to the brain against gravity. I know y'all don't think about gravity all day, every day, but it's hard to pump liquids against gravity, and your heart has to do that. And then it also has to pump the blood down to the toes with enough force to get us back up to the heart against gravity. That is a lot more work than the right side of the heart has to do, and that's why the wall is a lot thicker on the left side than the right side. Notice again, we're red on that side. That's because we just picked up oxygen from the lungs. So we've got oxygenated blood on the systemic circuit. Let's see. There is another third circulation, if you will. Despite the fact that the heart is filled with blood all day, every day, the blood that's in the heart is not actually supplying the heart with oxygen and nutrients and removing waste. And so the heart needs its own circulation to supply it with what I'm from here on out just going to call functional blood. Functional blood means oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich, waste-poor. That blood is going to be in the coronary circuit for the heart. And so this picture, love this picture, it's showing you the coronary circuit for the heart itself. We talked about coronary arteries, we talked about cardiac veins. That's the coronary circulation. Those are the blood vessels that are keeping the heart itself alive by supplying it with the oxygen and nutrients it needs to continue to pump all day, every day. If anything happens to this circulation, heart tissue dies, and then you will die as a result of that happening. Now, luckily or unluckily, I suppose, a lot of times people will get a warning that there's something going on with the coronary circulation. Let's say that one of those coronary arteries vasoconstricts temporarily. If that happens, blood flow distal to that constriction will slow down or even sometimes stop, and the heart muscle distal to that constriction will start to suffer, and you will feel that as chest pain. That chest pain is called angina pectoris, which literally means chest pain because angina, pain, pectoris is chest. So this is treatable. If you've ever heard a person say they're going to take their nitroglycerin pills, that is going to cause vasodilation, so it opens those blood vessels back up to restore the circulation to the heart. This again is usually a warning that there's something going on with the coronary circulation, and it means that person needs to be under medical care to make sure that, oh good, he found a loud toy. They need to be under medical care to prevent this from turning into a full-blown heart attack. Full-blown heart attacks are called myocardial infarction. So myocardial means the heart muscle itself. Infarction, hey, Captain, calm yourself. Infarction is a word that we will see in a couple of other chapters, I think a little bit later on. Basically, it means the tissue itself is starting to die. So the heart tissue is dying. This can happen because of intense vasoconstriction in the coronary circulation. It can happen because of plaque buildup in the coronary circulation. It can happen because a clot has gotten stuck in the coronary circulation. Any of those things is going to cut off blood supply to a specific part of the heart. So again, if a clot gets stuck right here, all of the heart muscle that is distal to that is no longer receiving that functional blood. And so it's starving. It's not getting nutrients. It's not getting oxygen. It's going to die. And that's what a heart attack is heart muscle dies because it didn't receive the blood supply that it actually needed to have. Keep in mind stuff that we talked about last semester. Heart muscle is amitotic, so you can't repair that dead tissue. Once it's dead forever. What will happen is your body will repair that with fibrotic tissue, which is essentially just scar tissue. So you've lost the pumping ability of that area, which means you're not going to be able to maintain blood pressure like you used to be able to. So that's why heart attacks are usually, well, not usually anymore, very often fatal. Skipping that. Okay. Heart valves. So we mentioned there's 4 heart valves, the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve, which are between the atria and the ventricles, and then the semilunar valves, the aortic and the pulmonary, which are between the ventricles and then the vessels that those lead to. All 4 of those valves, their job is to make sure blood is always moving in a forward direction. So we never want blood going backwards. So the tricuspid how did I just say that? Oh my gosh. The tricuspid valve's job is to make sure that when the right ventricle contracts, let me draw that out on the thing. Okay. When the right ventricle contracts, the blood has to move forward through the pulmonary valve, and it doesn't go backwards back into the right atrium where it just came from. We don't want that to happen. So when the right ventricle contracts, it actually shuts the tricuspid valve to make sure blood does not go back into the right atrium. Same thing's happening on the left side, but with the bicuspid valve. When the left ventricle contracts, it snaps shut the bicuspid valve so that blood does not go back into the left atrium. We've got that chordae tendineae that we talked about earlier and the papillary muscle that is ensuring that those valves do not flap open in the other direction. So these valves are relatively stable. I'm not saying they can't break down, but they're relatively stable. Okay. Chordae tendineae, again, little heartstrings. You'll see those when you dissect your heart. They, again, are just there to help make sure we don't flap open the wrong way. They're there to stabilize the valves just a little bit. Semilunar valves, they do not get the cords like the AV valves are going to get. Remember, AV, atrioventricular, that's the tricuspid, bicuspid. So here, this person is sticking what I'm hoping is a gloved hand, although I can't say that I really see a glove on there oh so well, but judging from the thickness of this looks like a left ventricle, and so this is more than likely the aortic valve that we are sticking a thumb through at this point. And since there are no strings associated with that, that would be the aortic semilunar valve that we're sticking a finger through. So when this ventricle pumps the blood is going to go through that valve and then into the aorta. When the ventricle relaxes, the blood is going to want to try to fall back down into this ventricle And we don't want that to happen. So when the blood tries to fall back down, these cusps catch blood and that closes them so that the valve sort of, I don't want to say slam shut, but it does kind of sort of slam shut. And then that closes the door to prevent the blood from falling from the aorta back into the left ventricle. Pulmonary valve doing the same thing off on the other side. So it's preventing the blood from falling back into the ventricles when the ventricles relax. Okay. Valve importance. Already said this just a little bit earlier. This is actually a valve replacement that is going on. Especially for people who have hypertension, those valves are under a lot of force and they can't necessarily take that force. And so valve replacement is a relatively common surgery that has to happen. In this case, I don't have notes for exactly what we are doing in this case, but it looks like we're replacing one of the semilunar valves just based on the anatomy of what's going on here. We can do that in multiple different ways. We can take cadaveric tissue, which is from a dead person. We can take pig valves, horse valves, cow valves, and we have mechanical valves to replace those, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that later on. But this is a human heart valve being transplanted. And competent valve is when a valve fails. Now again, the one and only job of the valve is to make sure that once blood, I'm drawing on, well, it actually worked on that side too. Once the blood passes that valve, it does not fall back down so that the heart has to repump the same blood. If the valve fails, you are having to repump the same blood over and over and over again. There are lots of reasons why a valve might be incompetent. Incompetent just really means bad. Okay. One of the reasons why a valve might be bad is valvular stenosis. Stenosis just means it's hardened. What I kind of want you to imagine is like a swollen door. When a door gets swollen, it doesn't fit in the jamb anymore, so you can't actually shut it. And that's kind of what happens in valvular stenosis. So, my note, if I remember right from when I snapped this picture from the internet, this was a Cocker Spaniel. Because apparently people who have Cocker Spaniels really super duper love their Cocker Spaniels. This is the tricuspid valve on this side, and you can tell because there's one cusp, there's two cusps, there's three cusps. This one looks like it's in great shape. Everything is nice and happy on that side. This is the bicuspid valve. It is supposed to have two cusps. This is not supposed to be there. It is preventing the bicuspid valve from closing like it's supposed to. And again, if the door doesn't close, blood can squirt past it. And so they're going in and they're going to replace this valve in this Cocker Spaniel, which I have no idea how much that costs in a dog, but I imagine it's cheaper in a dog than it is in a person. Do I have any other little notes in here that I wanted to share with you guys? Calcification, mitral valve. Do keep in mind mitral valve is the same thing as the bicuspid valve. But yeah. All right. Said that. So these are some of the mechanical valves that are out there on the market. Mechanical valves, there's no risk of immune rejection when you get those. But there's sort of a weird thing to know about these. You can hear these, especially this one and this one, clicking outside of a person. So you'll be sitting there eating dinner in a nice quiet restaurant with a person, and with every heartbeat, you'll hear click, 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 because these doors, as they close, these valves, as they close, you're hearing that device actually close. So a lot of people, they don't want to hear that, and so they choose to not get the mechanical valves. They go for the cadaveric or the cow or the pig or the whatever instead. There's a video that I usually show in class of Robin Williams talking about his cow valve that he got, but if I were to put that on this video, YouTube would take me down for copyright violation, so I can't do that. But if you guys want to try, I'll see if I can't. There we go. If you guys want to try to type that in and watch it for yourself, it's an interesting video because, one, it's Robin Williams and the man was bipolar. It's always interesting to watch Robin Williams on an upswing. But two, he talks about how he felt when his valve was not working correctly, and then he talks about why he chose cow valve, and then how he felt after he got his cow valve. And so it's just an interesting one to watch if you get a chance to do it. All right, that's where I'm going to start this one because the next blurb gets us into EKGs, and that kind of needs its own little blurb.